In the year 194 BC, the most powerful woman in China gave an order so cruel that historians 2,000 years later still hesitate to describe what happened. An order that would create something new, something that had never existed before, something that had no name, until she gave it one. Tonight, we open the file of Empress Lü Zhi of the Han Dynasty, a woman remembered by Chinese historians as the most sadistic ruler in 2,000 years of imperial history. And the punishment she invented would be studied and feared for every century that followed.
She was born around 241 BC into a wealthy family in the Shandong province. Her father was a respected official, the kind of man who collected favors and knew exactly when to cash them in. One afternoon, a local drifter walked into their town. He was loud, he was crude, he was, by every reasonable measure, a failure. Within days, he had forced his teenage daughter to marry the drunk. Her sisters laughed at her, her mother wept, her friends whispered behind her back. But Lü Zhi said nothing. For the next 15 years, she played the role of a dutiful peasant wife. She raised his children, she worked his fields. She cared for his aging parents while he drank, gambled, and vanished for weeks at a time with women she knew by name. She didn't complain, she didn't cry. She waited. When Liu Bang finally rose up in rebellion, she was captured by his greatest enemy, the warlord Xiang Yu. For 3 years, she was held as a hostage, starved, beaten. When Xiang Yu dragged her onto an execution platform and told her to beg for her life, she laughed. "Kill me if you want, but you will never be the man my husband is." While Lü Zhi had been building her husband's empire, another woman had been building something else entirely, his affection. Her name was Consort Qi, young, beautiful, musical, and utterly, fatally arrogant. She had joined Liu Bang during his military campaigns. She had danced for him at night while Lü Zhi was rotting in Xiang Yu's prison. She had borne him a son, a boy named Liu Ruyi, a boy the emperor adored far more than the son he had with his wife. By the time Lü Zhi returned from captivity, the damage was done. Her husband barely looked at her anymore. Consort Qi, meanwhile, made no effort to hide her victory. She mocked the older empress openly. She danced at imperial banquets while Lü Zhi sat silent beside her own husband. She whispered to the emperor every night, whispered that her son was the real heir, that Lü Zhi's son was weak, that the empire deserved something better. And the emperor began to listen. In the final years of his reign, Liu Bang made a catastrophic mistake. He began to speak openly about replacing the crown prince, about removing Lü Zhi's son from the line of succession, about making Consort Qi's boy the next emperor of China. Consort Qi encouraged him. She pushed, she pleaded. She mocked Lü Zhi to her face. She made enemies of every advisor who stood in her way. She thought she was winning. She had no idea what she was doing. Because Lü Zhi was watching. Lü Zhi was listening. Lü Zhi was keeping a list. And Lü Zhi did not forget. When the court ministers finally refused to allow the succession change, the emperor gave up. He knew his son, Liu Ruyi, would die the moment he himself was gone. So he made one final, desperate move. Then, in 195 BC, Liu Bang died. So the emperor is dead. The crown belongs to her son. And the woman who once knelt in the dirt of a captive's camp is now the most powerful person in the empire. What she does next will horrify a civilization. Within days of the funeral, Empress Lü moved. First came the humiliation. Consort Qi was stripped of her titles. Her silk robes were confiscated. Her long, famous hair, the hair the emperor had loved to stroke, was hacked off with a kitchen knife. An iron collar was locked around her throat. She was dressed in the filthy red clothing of a prison laborer and sent to the imperial kitchens. Every day, from dawn until midnight, she ground rice until her hands bled and her fingernails fell off. Every night, she was thrown into a cell with human waste for her bedding. She screamed, she cursed, she cried out in a song that the servants would remember for generations. "My son is a prince, and I grind rice like a slave. All day long I face death. 3,000 miles away, who will tell my son what has become of me?" That song reached the ears of Empress Lü, and Empress Lü smiled, because now she knew how to finish this. She sent riders to the province of Zhao. She summoned the young prince, Lü Zhi, back to the capital. She claimed she missed him. She claimed she wanted to reconcile. No one believed her, least of all her own son, Emperor Hui, who now sat on the throne. The young emperor knew his mother. He knew exactly what she was planning, and in one of the most extraordinary acts of brotherly love in Chinese history, he tried to save the boy himself. When Lü Zhi arrived at the capital, Emperor Hui personally rode out to meet him on the road. He refused to let the boy out of his sight. He ate every meal with him. He shared his own bed so that no assassin could reach him through the night. For weeks, it worked. For weeks, the young prince was safe. Until one morning, an ordinary morning, when Emperor Hui rose before dawn to go hunting. He did not want to wake his little brother. He left him sleeping peacefully in the imperial bedchamber, with servants guarding the door. When the emperor returned that afternoon, the boy was dead. A cup of wine beside the bed. His mother had been waiting. And when consort Qi, still grinding rice in the kitchens, still hoping, still praying, heard the news of her son's death, she broke. She screamed his name until her voice gave out. She cursed Empress Lü. She cursed the Han Dynasty. She cried out that she would haunt her murderer for 1,000 years. This was the final mistake. Because until that moment, Empress Lü had only planned to let her rival die slowly in the kitchens. Now, she had a better idea. 2,000 years of Chinese history, and nothing would prepare them for what she did next. Even the historians who recorded it apologized for the words they had to use. Empress Lü ordered consort Qi dragged from the kitchens and brought to a private chamber deep within the palace. She ordered the doors sealed. What happened inside that chamber is recorded in the records of the Grand Historian, the most authoritative source on early Chinese history. First, they cut off her arms, both of them, at the shoulders. She did not die. Then her legs, at the hips. She still did not die. They gouged out her eyes, both of them. She still did not die. They poured a caustic substance down her throat that burned away her vocal cords forever. They poured molten metal into her ears until the drums ruptured. They could not silence her screams, but they could make sure she would never speak, never hear, never see, never move again. She was still alive. She was a torso, a living, breathing, mutilated thing that had once been the most beautiful woman in the Han court. Empress Lü had her body carried to the palace latrine, a pit filled with human waste from the entire imperial household. She had the creature dropped into the filth. And then, standing at the edge of the pit, looking down at what remained of her rival, Empress Lü gave the creation a name. Ren Zhi, the human pig. From that day forward, that was what consort Qi was called. Not by her name, not by her title, not by any title she had ever earned. She was the human pig. And Empress Lü was not finished, because she had one more person she wanted to show. Her son. That word, Ren Zhi, the human pig. 2,000 years later, Chinese parents still use it to silence misbehaving children. That is how deep this story cut. Empress Lü invited her son, Emperor Hui, to the palace. She told him she had something extraordinary to show him, a creature, unlike anything he had ever seen. The young emperor followed his mother. She led him through the corridors, past the throne room, past the gardens, down to the lowest levels of the palace, to the latrine. She pointed into the pit. "Do you recognize her?" Emperor Hui looked down. What he saw, that limbless, eyeless, blood-soaked thing that had once been the most beautiful woman in the empire, broke him. He did not speak at first. He did not cry. He simply backed away from the pit, walked out of the palace, and returned to his chambers alone. That night, he sent his mother a single message, a message that is still quoted by Chinese historians 2,000 years later. "This is not something a human being does. I am your son, but I can no longer rule this empire for you." From that day forward, Emperor Hui refused to govern. He refused to attend court. He refused to read reports. He refused to even speak to his mother. He turned to wine. He turned to every pleasure he could find in the city. He drank from morning until night. He disappeared for days at a time into the pleasure quarters of the capital. 4 years later, at the age of 23, he was dead.
Some say he drank himself to death. Others say his mother poisoned him when she realized he would never give her a grandson to control. The truth was buried with him. His mother did not attend the funeral. She had already chosen the next puppet. With her son gone, Empress Lü did what no Chinese woman had ever done. She took the throne itself, not as regent, not as dowager. She ruled the Han Dynasty directly, in her own name, for the next 8 years, a feat that would not be repeated in Chinese history for nearly 1,000 years. She placed infant emperors on the throne, babies she could control with nothing more than a raised eyebrow. When one grew old enough to ask questions, she had him quietly murdered and replaced with another. When one learned his true mother had been killed by her, she had him declared insane, locked in a sealed room, and starved to death. She appointed her own brothers and nephews to every major position in the empire. The old generals who had founded the Han Dynasty with her husband were executed, one by one. Some on false charges, some for no charges at all, some simply for looking at her the wrong way. She built a network of spies that reached into every household in the capital. Children informed on parents, wives informed on husbands, servants informed on masters. No one could speak freely. No one could trust anyone. And anyone who displeased her, anyone at all, was reminded of what had happened in that latrine. In her final years, the historians tell us, Empress Lü became something strange. She stopped sleeping. She claimed to see the ghost of Liu Ruyi, the poisoned prince, standing at the foot of her bed every night. She claimed to hear consort Qi whispering in the palace corridors. She ordered every cat in the capital killed because she believed her dead rival would return as a cat and tear out her throat. In the summer of 180 BC, she was riding in her carriage when she claimed a black creature, a dog, a wolf, something else entirely, leapt from the shadows and bit her deep in the armpit. No one else saw it. No one else could find any trace of it. But Empress Lü fell ill that same night. She died weeks later, alone, screaming in pain, begging her ancestors for forgiveness that would never come. She was 61 years old. And so she died, alone, hated, begging gods who would not listen. But the worst was not what happened to her. The worst was what she left behind. The moment Empress Lü was in the ground, her enemies struck. Her entire family, every brother, every nephew, every cousin, every infant, was hunted down and executed within the month. Her personal servants were tortured for information and then killed. The Han court tried to strike her name from every official record. They failed, because what she had created could not be erased. For 2,000 years, Chinese scholars have argued the same tired question. Was she born this way, or was she made this way? A monster from birth, or a woman pushed beyond the limits of human endurance? But that question misses what actually matters, because every dynasty that followed her, every empress, every concubine, every mother of an emperor studied her. They didn't study her as a warning. They studied her as a blueprint.
400 years later, another empress would poison her own son to seize the throne. She had read about Empress Lü. 800 years later, another woman would become the only female emperor in Chinese history. She had read about Empress Lü. 2,000 years later, in the final days of the Qing dynasty, one more Empress Dowager would rule China through terror and murder for nearly 50 years. She had read about Empress Lü, too. The Han Dynasty tried to erase her name, but every ambitious woman who came after her remembered it, and remembered exactly what it was capable of. History remembers Empress Lü as a monster. But monsters are made. And once they are made, they never stop teaching. Case file number 001 is closed. Next time, we investigate the ugliest empress in Chinese history, a woman who hunted beautiful young men through the streets of her own capital, and every single one of them disappeared. Next case file, Qian Nanfeng, the monster of Jin.